Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another issue of the ECM Discourse lecture series. For those who are with us for the first time, let me briefly introduce the context of tonight's talk. ECM Discourse is the public lecture series of the ECM, short for Educating, Curating, Managing postgraduate program at the University of Applied Arts. My name is Luisa Ziaja. I am one in a team of 7 directors of this program, and our public lecture series is dedicated to a critical, forward-thinking discourse in the expanded field of curating and exhibition making, and featuring thinkers and practitioners who are, in our view, seminal figures in such a discourse and practice. So tonight, I'm super happy to welcome with us the independent curator, editor, and writer Nataša Petrešin-Bachelez, who is based in Paris. So great to have you with us, Nataša. We just said that we know each other for more than 15 years. And ever since I have followed your work, it has been very important to me what you have been doing for the last 20 years, I guess. And before I hand over to you, I just introduce you briefly. You entitled tonight's talk on practices of care within curating. And you have been working and thinking on this topic of curating, but also caring and the questions within and this whole field of tension for quite some time. As I mentioned, you're an independent curator, editor, and writer, and you have curated many exhibitions, projects. Maybe I just mention a few of them: Contour Biennale, Cotton as Cotton, and I think you will mention it tonight in your talk. Also, Defiant Muses, Defiant Muses, and feminist video collectives in France in the 1970s and 80s, which took place in Reina Sofia and also in Lille. Also projects on questions of art and ecology, but I will not mention too many. You can read this up on our website where we have your whole CV. But I also want to mention that you also, as we do, are involved in teaching and thinking, I would say, about our field of practice and discourse for a long time already. So you have co-organized and co-founded the seminar Something You Should Know in Paris. And you have been a part of many different groups and collectives that think and practice in this field. You have been a co-director of Les Laboratoires d'Aubervilliers and different other institutional, para-institutional positions you had in the last years. Also very important in your practice is editing. So you have been chief editor of different publication series, for example, Manifesta Journal, which was very influential for a long time and very important reference also for us in our teaching, but also for L'International Online, which is a recent, so to say, important reference or became one, a publishing platform of L'International, the Confederation of Cultural Institutions, and other reviews and publishing projects. You have, of course, also participated and contributed to publications, lectures, organized seminars, and your ongoing research is, you put it in these words, into situated curatorial practices, empathy and transnational feminism, slow institutions, performative practices in the former Eastern Europe, and engaged artistic practices in the era of the Anthropocene, Capitolocene. And since 2019, you also teach in Antwerp. And just recently, you took over another position. So you are mingling, balancing very many position things and contexts. So since January, you have been the head of the cultural program at the Cité Internationale des Arts in Paris. So this for that. You can add, of course, but we are eager to hear, your thoughts on curating as a practice of radical care. Tonight, also more about your practice in the curatorial field. And yeah, I'm super happy to have you with us. Thank you, Nataša.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luisa. Thank you, Beatrice, and to all the program directors and all the students and everyone. Hello and very warm welcome who joined and listened to this encounter. It's always a bit humbling, but also, there is an anxiety rising when one hears about one's biography. It makes me feel old. It makes me feel as if I'm doubled or tripled. And it's actually maybe the starting point that I would like to point out is the fact that when one does so many things, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying at all that I'm the only one here in this room, online room that has done so many things, but it's true that one tends to think, what is it that actually we are doing, and where does the entropy goes and energy, and therefore, Luisa, you presented me as an independent curator. I call myself interdependent curator. So interdependency is something that is really important for me. The more that I'm thinking and understanding how we work, I have worked for last 8 years as a freelance, and I have never been more dependent in my life. So either financially, economically, I mean, everything that comes with it. So this term of interdependence is really, I think I'm kind of, how to say, milité is the word in France. So I'm fighting and struggling for transforming the profession called independent curator into interdependent curator. And there are some friends and colleagues that are following me. So, but yeah, thank you for this presentation. I have been following your program, and it was actually really inspiring also for us to think at HESS in Paris, where we do something you should know. And as you will see, I will try to present some of my recent endeavors and research, and how, as I said before, while we were chatting with Luisa, it's you will see that there are a lot of very banal gestures in what I'm thinking when I'm speaking about radical care and curating. But I think those gestures are in diametrical sometimes contrast to the way this practice that we are inhabiting as freelance curators, how these practices have been actually dehumanizing sometimes, or completely alienating from the source of what we are called for. So curator is somebody, curare, as we all know, coming from the word to cure, to heal, to care. And as recently said for those that might have read Ariela Aisha Zolai's book, The Impossible History, how this caring for objects that is the base, let's say, where we start from as freelance curators or museum curators, how this activity has been in diametrical relation and completely opposite of where these objects would be coming from. So mostly from, let's say, in the anthropological museums, from colonial endeavors and genocides. So there is something, I think, in the practice of curating that has to be repaired as well, and has to, or at least has to be claimed differently. So that's all what I'm going to say this evening and repeat myself. So I will share my screen, where I start with a very neoliberal diagram, as you can see here. It's a kind of first, let's say, first window into what I think I'm trying to do. It sounds very pretentious, and those that know me, I hope know that I'm not as pretentious as that, but it does, let's say, resonate with this question of how to transform artistic, curatorial, and institutional practices. Relates very much like I, you know, the way we announced this talk was about the practices to come, and I'm indebted to one of your colleagues, Nora Sternfeld, for that, because she actually, with her curating and mediating practices, actually thinks about at this very moment about practices that are still not here and that are emerging. So I think that we are, with the pandemics, especially in the global north, which is a situation that in other parts of the world has been lived for sometimes for centuries, sometimes for decades. But we in the global north, let's say, we are kind of living it for the first time, and therefore calling it crisis, whereas actually it is a state of a state or a situation that has been around before. And so I think that I would hope that it is a moment where we can pause and really rethink how not to do and how not to fall back to the practices that we were doing before. It's something that Bruno Latour has been writing a lot about ever since the pandemic started, and it was quite influential. So kind of like asking oneself, so that's why also this self-reflexivity as a method is really important, I think, in interdependent curatorial practices, is to constantly actually question whom am I addressing, whom am I talking to, are the relations that I'm bringing forth in a way, in a kind of same, in the same social space and same ethics as the content that I wish to provide. So these are kind of, let's say, questions that I have always been quite obsessed with. So there are a few intersections here. I'm talking about spaces of humbleness and interdependence and all that locally. So I think that's another kind of reason, let's say, to think about locality differently. We are still in France as I speak now. I'm sorry, I didn't situate myself, so I'm speaking from Paris. I'm originally from Ljubljana, but I'm in Paris since last 16 years. And at the moment, as I speak here, we are in a lockdown, and the situation does bring new or calls for renewed, let's say, debates about locality, and about locality that would not be, that would be diametrically opposite to extreme right-wing terms of locality, which is something that is really important for their ideologies. So parts of this, I think, come from understanding practices in the art field that is traditionally, art sphere comes from capitalist and colonialist structures. So it is a place of competitivity. It is a place of extraction of knowledge, extraction of networks, ideas. It's very individualist based, and I think that something that has been always around, was let's say this propositional thinking of artists to go and work more collectively. So I think this the concepts of friendship, the concepts of commoning, and are really important in what we do. And as you will see when I will speak about the initiative, it's something that is based on friendship, and how not to extract that friendship becomes again part of something that would be capitalist is definitely a capitalist commodity, is definitely something that we have to have in mind and let's say be aware of. residing with others, such as talking to trees, rivers, animals, and spirits, is really of utmost survival. You know, it's the necessity for us to survive as a human species, I would say. And in connection to that, as you see, it's I call it intersectional feminism. The questions of cleaning, caring, who is cleaning the spaces in which we work, in which we live. Especially institutional spaces. This, you know, so I'm bringing this in juxtaposition because the idea of Anthropocene was too much of a white idea at first place, and it's very much criticized by that. It brought very much forth the necessity of understanding that humans and non-humans should be aligned much more horizontally. But it kind of obliterated that the humans within themselves have been dehumanizing a large part of humans' population, and that before this accountability takes place, you know, we cannot talk as something like humanity with a big H. And I think intersectionality, and especially intersectional feminism, brings this together when it talks about this intersectional method, which, as you might know, brings together different existences, different points of oppressed identities that are never oppressed just through one lens. You know, it's always through somebody is oppressed always through the gender, religion, sexuality, race, and it all comes together. And more recently, so Françoise Vergès, that maybe some of you also had the chance to listen in Vienna some years ago in a symposium organized by Luisa and Elke Krasny and their colleagues. Françoise Vergès recently, so she's a theorist and feminist based in France. She talked about the decolonial feminism actually as this, let's say, field of practice and of knowledge that takes into consideration the brown and the black bodies, so the racialized women's labor that is related to cleaning and caring for families or children. So how this labor has always been something racialized. And as you will see later on, this in one instance, the cleaning, for example, became for me one of the questions when with the initiative we are presenting ourselves. We sometimes ask the institutions that are hosting us, or at least we will try to ask them if they have, what are the contracts with the cleaners, what are the relationships with their cleaners, and what are their names. Because in France especially, not in Germany as much as I understand, I don't know how it's in Austria, but in France it's outsourced. So for example, when I was running Les Laboratoires d'Aubervilliers, we would never meet the cleaners. The cleaners would leave by 7 o'clock in the morning. So we arrived to a prepared space in which we performed our institution, but we never had the chance to exchange with those women that were making it possible. So, well, this is just, yeah, I would say one important aspect in rethinking practices. Tracing materials with the carbon footprint. So is something also that I have been developing, and you know, it relates so much on one side on the transport of objects, but also transport of subjects. So, for example, in one exhibition that I did in Beirut and then in Guangzhou, we were trying to trace actually all the carbon footprint, even for the ink that was, for example, used for an artwork. So it becomes almost impossible. You realize that it's the materiality of what we do is really something that is you know, that has to be, I think, put back into the center in order to start think locally, because we understood that the materials that the artists used in the exhibition came from everywhere. So the carbon footprint also in relation, unfortunately, also to our computers, internet. So this kind of awareness, you will see, we were trying to work on, especially in a project I did for the Contour Biennale. And then routing, which is a little bit more related to what I do now at Cité des Arts, which is the biggest space of residencies actually that I know. We have 325 studios in Paris, and it's a very time-consuming practice to be leading such a huge living body, but I'm also thinking in all this perspective of thinking locally and what is the locality and what is the new locality, let's say. I think that the residencies have always been there as an answer, as a possible answer to that. So it's something that I might speak if there is some question about that, but I will not come really more close to that, but it's just there for yeah, like an idea. Where it's a recent project that really was in a way the starting point, because I would like to give you now just a few examples that will be mostly related to the initiative for practices and visions of radical care that I initiated together with Elena Sorokina. I'm not sure if Elena is with us. If she is, she should send us a hello, as I would then include her in the conversation, but a little bit more later about that. Cotton as Cotton was the title of the Contour Biennial that I curated in 2019, 2018 and 2019. And the themes, that's why I started a little bit like in verse. So I deployed the themes, and now I'll try to make concrete cases. It took place obviously before the pandemics, but I think I really was thinking about what should we do with biennials anyway, and how this has become a space of cultural capitalism and completely unsustainable professional behavior and kind of circuits of economy and attention that have doubled and tripled in the last maybe 5-10 years. So I decided to root it in the city where it is, so in the city of Mechelen in Belgium, and to open it in time. So we had like 3 chapters that were aligned with different moon phases, because I claimed also the kind of more ecofeminist movement, cosmic movement, and how it affects us. And the biennial talked about the relationships between thinking about degrowth and thinking about decoloniality. In Belgium, the colonial past is very heavy, and something that is too rarely has become a real issue. But at that time, it was really, there were a few collectives that were very active, and we saw in the recent 1 year or 2 actually a really big renaissance actually of renewed discussions about colonial past in Belgium. And but I will specifically talk about, so I can say more about later on about the title, but it was about this extractivism and materiality also in the first place. But one of the projects was this educational project that I was leading together with several schools. And yeah, I forgot to say that I insisted that I think we were 95% coming by train only to Belgium. So wherever we were living, it was a really regional and a very consciously regional endeavor. So the artists, myself, some artists were then even coming from Brussels by bike. So there was all kinds of experimentations that were not like put on as a practice, but it kind of became something that we shared among the group of artists working together. But the transnational alliance that you see here, We Cannot Work Like This, the colonial practices and degrowth. This was a year-long exchange project between students of these different schools. It was, let's say, initiated by Bram Krevits, who is unfortunately no longer with us, who founded Open Design course for asylum seekers and refugees in Ghent. And he was somebody who was coming from open source movement, which is another important let's say, ideology that I believe in. Although I'm working, as you can see, with PowerPoint, so I will, contradict myself immediately. And with Bram and with Adrian Lahoud from Royal School of Architecture. Adrian was the curator of the Sharjah Triennial about the rights of the future generation recently. So we brought together this idea to have meetings with the students and among students that would talk about the future practices that they should develop. So they were architects, they were graphic designers, they were of different statutes. So some were asylum seekers, some were refugees. They were intercultural communication workers and social workers, and some were artists. And we were together researching what would be the practices of that would be anti-racist, anti-colonial, anti-sexist, and environmentally sustainable. So this was a kind of, let's say, research topic. So you will see a lot of photos of us sitting, thinking, performing together. This is with the open design course in Ghent that I just told you about. And this was a really beautiful encounter with this group of artists that later on became something they are calling themselves the Post Collective. And you will see them again just in a minute in a slide. And we had like several meetings. This one, for example, took place in London, where we brought together two activist groups. One was Justice for Grenfell, which was related to the Grenfell Tower that you probably heard of, the catastrophe of a social housing tower in London that was burnt and 74 people died. The activists are working heavily on accountability, and it was really important that this took place in Royal School of Architecture because it turns out that one of the most accountable subjectivity in this matter, in this case, are the architects who signed a contract knowing that the coating of the facade of that tower was inflammable. So it was really important that a generation of future architects hears that, and how is it possible that somebody with a consciousness and intelligence signs something like that. And at the same time, we had a meeting with students activists from who were Justice for Workers, they are called, and they were part of Goldsmiths College. They were part of also of London School of Economics, working together especially with cleaners and cleaning staff and the security staff for having better conditions and claiming for better conditions. And this is my favorite. It's this here, who keeps the cube white? It's a transparent, it's a banner that they put when the Goldsmith opened a new gallery. So that was in 2018 or 2019. And wherever I can, I show this image because it just brings what I was saying before also about the cleaning and caring issue. It's the best banner and the best slogan I have seen in years. So we were cooking together. So attention, attention. This is before the COVID-19. No masks or anything. It was really important. This was in a social space and community kitchen in Brixton in London. And out of these meetings came several proposals. One of them is in the school where I'm teaching now, in St. Lucas in Antwerp. The students proposed this banner to be put in the library, in their library, because they said it has there is a whole body of literature missing, and they called it "Break the Canon, Make the Canon." So they claimed for a budget in the school, in their school, to buy books for them of importance that would talk about post-colonial theory, decolonial theory, blackness, racism in art, and so forth. There was the last gathering of all the students that came together took place in the second chapter of the biennial, and this beautiful performance took place. So it was all about the multivocality and different professions that these young people would be projecting themselves into. So here is, for example, these are the members of the Post Collective. Mohammed is hearing what his two colleagues are speaking to him in different languages into his ears at the same time, and trying to say what he hears, but also tries to translate it in his maternal language, which is Arabic. So it was really a beautiful sound piece. And why I'm talking also about Post Collective is because it's really a collective that came out of this program in Ghent that I recently that I just told you about. Sorry, but it's really based on the values of mutuality and of mutual support and friendship. They are at this moment working together with Robin van Bezien, who was also one of the artists that I worked with on a new film. They do sound poetry together. They basically take care of each other. So they were one of the inspirations for the Initiative for Practices and Visions of Radical Care. We have this beautiful Holod Hawash's embroidery as one of the symbols. Holod is from Iraq, and she makes this embroideries. She's a feminist artist, and she in a way transforms this practice of embroidery on a kind of kilt, this textile that covers, in Iraq, it's a textile that would cover furniture. So you would take care of the furniture in that way, so it doesn't age too fast. And so we took this as our symbol in the beginning. And radical care, precisely because we said it's such an uncaring space, the art space. That if you are talking about radical care within the art space, that's what is radical already in itself. To say that you would not care on first place only to build your own career on other artists' careers, etc., but that actually you would take something as a friendship and care into the heart of it and try to develop that further. Basically, this is the idea. Let's say very basic idea behind it. I wanted to say that what is really important is that this is an endeavor that, as I said before, was co-organized or let's say co-thought with Elena Sorokina, who is a dear friend of mine and a colleague, a curator herself, and with whom actually we worked together in the Transnational Alliance. Elena was at that time director of HISC in Ghent, which is Academy with Residencies. And we are also not only best friends, but also were for a long time neighbors in Paris. So, you know, how life comes together, brings together things sometimes in a beautiful way. And Elena was a curator of a beautiful two-part exhibition in at the time when I was finishing the biennial. She was invited by an association called Porte Ouverte sur l'Art that is based in Paris. And that was from 2015 working in supporting artists coming from Syria to stay in exile in France. And Elena was asked to curate an exhibition together with certain artists that they were supporting, but not only. So she was working with a group of different artists, among them Holod, who is in Helsinki at the moment in exile. She was also in touch, for example, with this amazing organization, Artists at Risk, that you might know from Berlin, and several organizations also in Paris that are supporting exiled artists. Also, by the way, in Cité des Arts in Paris, where I work, we have one residency with the city of Paris for artists coming from zones of conflict and asking for exile. So it's and from this exhibition on, we kind of kept in touch when the pandemic started, because we had to be certain that everyone is doing well. So we started with let's say, first it was the debates of updating each other, where one is, what do they need, if they needed any kind of first emotional or then financial support or structural support. So it kind of started from there, and it grew when we came across the beautiful project by our colleagues from Berlin, Di Balcone. It was a project organized during the lockdown that you maybe heard of, organized by Oevel Dormosolio and Joanna Varsha. And inspired by that gesture that Oevel and Joanna did in Berlin, we started to think also in the light of what we were of our discussions, that so we intentionally let's say called up not only friends artists, but especially artists that we knew of from the greater Paris area, so most of them in Paris and around in the suburb towns, that we knew are not, let's say, they're definitely not in the market, so they're not having any galleries, any kind of longer term support. And we knew their practices, and their practices are based on caring, on issues of care. So issues of care, of mutuality, of trust, of ethics. And we brought together actually this group, and we started basically, this is how the initiative grew. In May, when the lockdown, we knew that it was announced that it would be over, Elena was in touch with a group of middle-aged artists, mostly from French-American background, who were mostly living in good areas of Paris, but they were very, they felt very isolated. They're an informal group of artists, and they wanted to symbolically connect, do some performative gestures in order to, let's say, address some attention to each other. And Elena had a fantastic idea of, at the same time we were in touch, and she was in touch with Gaël Chouan, who is an artist who at that time worked with École des Actes School of Acts, which is located in Aubervilliers, in the northeast part, one of the poorest towns of Paris. And the School of Acts was in, Gaël was working there with youngsters who actually, it's a kind of social artistic project for learning French and educating youngsters in difficult situations, and sometimes also refugees who are living in that town, like adolescent refugees, mostly boys. So it's a school of French language actually through theater. And so they also learn practices of scenography, of acting, and especially of language. And they are also paid for their work. And they have been really financially vulnerable during the lockdown. So we decided that we would, in a way, hijack or just combine, let's say, the gesture of the artists who wanted to support each other because some friends died and because they were living alone. So we asked a group of people. So these are some of the historic, as art historians, it's always important to reference other people. So Ida Biar and Goran Terbuljak made a French window in early 70s. So it was a confined space of a window that became an exhibition space in Paris. Tomasz Salamon, Slovenian artist who is drawing a line through Novi Sad in 69. Or Therese Amp Jones, who when she was very, very young mother, so with a baby of a few weeks, expressed in that way through drawing a line in a confined space of her where she was living in France as well. And so we decided to actually connect the School of Act School, as you can see it here in Aubervilliers, with the lines. We could draw a line of 1 kilometer because 1 kilometer was the space in which we could move. It was one of the most strict lockdowns, was besides Spain, was in France. So the artist filled in, move, we had to have these justifications, and there was one that said you can go to work. And so we said you cross that one, you're going to work, and you will do a 1 kilometer if you can of a line. And so kind of symbolically, let's say, we moved between the group of artists that were drawing the line in the evening with non-toxic materials. So everything was, you will see a lot of lines now, but this was all done more or less in this kind of guerrilla style, and trying to act in a space that they could act, but going and, let's say, gravitating to the space of Aubervilliers. Also Aubervilliers, because it was a symbol, and it is a symbol of this division between the global north and global south. Aubervilliers and other cities in Paris are the global south it's the most poor towns in which the so-called essential workers that were on the front lines during the pandemics, that are again mostly racialized, that are women going to cleaning in the hospitals, or medical sisters and assistants. They are mostly living in those poor neighborhoods with high rate of infection because of the conditions of social housing that don't allow sometimes the distanciation, or because of the family in which, on 20 square meters live 10 people. So it was also the symbolic act towards paying attention to these spaces. And with this action, we gathered, there was some, apparently some additional money that was brought in through the crowdfunding. So we were, for the School of Acts. So we were very happy about that. Some artists did actions where they could. For example, Ismail Afgan, that you will see a bit later on, who is a jewelry maker, and who just recently we celebrated him obtaining the refugee status. So Ismail created this amazing long line and moved with it where he could in order not to be caught because of the problem with papers. And this was Franck from Legend du Terpan, who in a similar way with Thomas Chalamon drew a line towards the north, navigating towards the north. And Gaëlle Chouan who drew a line in Normandy where she was confined, and with henna, which she said is one of these colonial products that she also works with in her own practice. And because of what this how this let's say energy that brought us together, we wanted to keep that alive, and so we, in June, when museums opened and art institutions opened their doors, and it became very clear that there is a new a very sanitary kind of disciplining of the bodies at work, while at the same time in Paris we were experiencing massive turnout on Black Lives Matter protests. So we were actually debating on this round table that was organized in Montmartre, in our friend's place called La Maison de l'Ours. We were debating with the collective The Living and Dead Ensemble, who are mostly coming from Haiti, and they work together with Olivier Marbeuf on films and theater plays. There was Elisabeth Lebovici. There was Nadia Ayala Kisukidi, who is a philosopher from Paris 8 University, and there were several of the artists from the initiative. So we tried to, in a way, in a fresh way, think about this contradiction between this hyper-sanitarization and hyper-disciplinarization of bodies, while racialized bodies are dying as well as in France. You know, it's a huge. Those that are maybe from France know very well about the struggle of many families for justice for their family members who have been killed in the arms of police. An important part of the initiative is also this very tree, because we established an office under this magnificent Lebanese cedar tree, which gives us, you know, its beauty, but also is very inspiring. And among our group of artists, we are working with Kati Tutayasu, who is a animist, a shaman, and an artist. And with her, through her, we are talking also to this tree very regularly, whenever we can. An important part of how we do things and how we maintain, let's say, because it's really about, we are now a group of 20, 25 people enlarged that meets tries to meet on regular basis, and sometimes it's just me and Elena, and there is a whole bunch of you know, people that have not met with us before, but we know them all. So basically, you know, either it's really as it was first, let's say, initiated by the two of us. Now it's completely open source, so it's really about making it feasible, but also obviously enlarging the possibility that everyone feels welcome in joining the picnic assemblies, as we call them. So where we try to, so you see we are smiling a lot, we are enjoying ourselves a lot. So we basically, we eat together, of course, with some kind of safety distance. This was in June, so we were deconfined, so we didn't care so much, I have to say. But the idea is that everyone shares among the group that meets what are their concerns if there is any kind of personal or financial or professional question, and we try to find out an answer to that in the group. So we try to see with what kind of competencies there can, how can we help basically with each of us being from, you know, different spaces, different origins of different competencies. So there are artists, graphic designers, jewelry makers, curators, filmmakers, shaman. So it's really, it's always a checkup basically, and then we try to follow. And one of the artists that we work with and that has deeply affected the way we would like to function is Kenya Tegia, who is a performer and video maker of French Cameroonian origins, and is somebody who has been deaf since his birth. He's also somebody that we call faux entendant, which means that he was not entirely deaf, so he learned how to speak and can vocalize and speak really completely normally, but is also an activist. He works on the intersectional issues of his own identity, which is at the same time deaf, at the same time Black, and also seropositive and queer. And his practice is based on his survival. So basically, he established a contract, which is a contract of trust and a kind of manifesto that he invites institutions to sign before they start to collaborate. So it's also, it brought us to the, especially through working with him and through seeing him work and seeing him how he manages to you know, to institutions suddenly to become completely self-reflexive, where they realize that they're actually ableist and they have not realized that before. So it's really, I'm immensely indebted to Kenya for that. And I also invited him to be part of the exhibition Not Fully Human, Not Human at All, which was on view in Hamburg and now in Paris. And yeah, each time it's a huge endeavor for him and a real challenge for this institution, especially if the institutional practice has not been yet that open to these questions. And so Kenya performed in the Czech Center, which was curated by Simona Dvorakova, in an exhibition where she invited the initiative to take part. Simona is part of the initiative as well. And afterwards we did a conversation. So he doesn't use the implants. So the way the conversation runs is through velotyping, which is this fast, it's a kind of, it goes through internet, and it turned out to be a hell here because the internet didn't work and the algorithm was not well done, neither of the organization that we solicited. And the conversation is transcribed in our radio channel. The initiative has a radio channel on a community radio called R22. And it's also transcribed in a way that Kenya, we asked Kenya for his time and energy. So he transcribed literally. This is also in a way part of how he works. All these hesitations and bugs are part of his reality. Another thing we organized, Ismail didn't have any status for 4 years now in France. He came from Afghanistan. He's an amazing jewelry maker. And we organized a photo shoot for him so that we could, Elena, who was working with Ismail on the case of the exhibition that I mentioned before, and supports Ismail a lot. worked with his lawyer and brought this as how to say, as an evidence of his practice in Paris, which was one of the questions that the lawyer was asking. So this is the conversation we did with Katitu Tayasu, because she intervenes on more subtle levels, let's say, of our existences. She's also quite an amazing sound artist and an amazing speaker. Here she's talking about the dreams and the dreaming, something that is very dear to ancient knowledges, and let's say, she tries to conceive of dreaming also as a space for artistic practice and exhibition space. So it's really an amazing basically monologue of Katitu. And more recently, when the lockdown again began to be quite strict, we decided to do caring walks. We just call them caring walks. We walk together and talk. It's also inspired by Lucius Burckhardt, who was an architecture theorist in Kassel and who wrote about the beauty of landscapes and strolling. So this kind of, some people came walking or up to the north of Paris where we met. And then again, it was a moment, here you can see how it's just the moment of welcoming and checking on each other. And the celebration under our beautiful tree of Ismail's day when he got the papers. So this was a really joyful moment for us. And currently we are asked actually by several institutions, and actually we will have a conversation tomorrow with one, where we try to insist on the fact that if we collaborate together, it's very inspired again by Kenya, Tegia's manifesto, is that we try to say this is how we work and this is what we believe in that kind of relations. How can your institution, how can you react? How can you welcome us? And we will definitely ask the questions about the conditions of labor, conditions of horizontality or respect, resolving of conflicts, sexism, cleaning, issues that we care about, there is I think there is also, like within the exhibition that I just curated in Paris, we will do a second big gathering, such as it was a year ago, about the hyper sanitarization. And this time we want to come closer to the idea of racism having not only a psychological impact, but physical impact, and how actually caring practices in art should be part of the curriculum of the public health, and how the public health and art could be should be two fields that are working together, and not just in the sense of art therapy. Although the art therapy is something that really interests me as a potential field of exploration as well. So I don't know how clear this was. As I said before, Luisa, I'm going in loops. It's the nature of my thinking. So, but yeah, I hope I gave you some of the ideas forth.
Thank you so much, Nataša, for so many inspiring examples of artistic practice, of what curating could mean, can mean. And I would invite everybody to open up their cameras again so that we see each other, which makes a discussion much more easy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for your attention. And by the way, I was not aware, but a colleague, he's a thinker and artist and writer, Lionel Manga, just recently, and I think he will develop on that, but he recently told me that actually something I didn't know, that care and curiosity have the same root. So, and that curiosity means that you care so much that you want to know more. So it's something that I was not aware, but thank you for your curiosity.
No, that's a very beautiful image and also connection that you make. So we have many people in the audience. If there are any pressing questions, now we would take them. Beatrice and I, we are trying to not oversee anybody, but please make yourself visible for us. If you would like to comment, if you would like to ask a question on this really inspiring presentation by Nataša. But maybe I will start a little bit, bringing us in a conversational mode, so to say. So actually, in the end, you just mentioned that you were asked by an institution or different institutions to, I would be interested in actually what they are interested in, because as I understand it, what you do with this initiative is actually taking place outside of institutions, and probably deliberately so. Because you have so many institutional experiences, I would say, but also, of course, also connected to it. But I would be interested what interests them, and if you could elaborate a little bit on your perspective on what would it mean to bring this initiative to an institution. And a second question would be, so what can institutions learn from these practices?
I see, just before I answer, I would like to see if Elena is still there, because I have seen her in the audience. Elena, do you hear us?
I think she was here, but...
You're here. Do you want to open your camera and join me? So I don't feel so lonely. Or if you want, just through audio. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello, my dear.
Sorry, I was a little late. Actually, I plugged in late. I missed the. I'm sure that Nataša provided an amazing talk and did a great job. So no doubt about it.
It's perfect. Thank you, my dear. I would like to invite you to be part of this answering of to the questions raised by Luisa, because Luisa is asking. And I think it's really, it's great to hear from both sides. What do the institution actually expect from us? What are they interested in? I would just start to say that actually it came from a curator who is in residency in Fondation Finico, which is in Romainville. Romainville is one of the suburban towns of Paris. And that immediately when we were with Elena starting to think about that, we said, like, okay, how not to behave as curators, where we will take the group and pick up 3 artists, 4 artists, and that will be it. So I would say that it was actually almost like it was a on one side first we and I will let then Elena say more, but first important thing was the fact that this foundation is built on a premises, or it is taking place on a premises of a former factory that we know from artists that I worked with who have done toxic tours. So meaning this kind of formats, you know, when you go and stroll in spaces that are polluted and you talk about it. So the whole mission about that specific space. So basically the foundation has this controversy, let's say, that it has residencies for people where its soil has not been entirely depolluted. decontaminated. So this was one of the starting points. We said, can we go actually to a space like that with an initiative of radical care? And the other one was about the selection. So it's something that we put forth in a group, and we talked about it together in the group, what to do, with whom to do. So basically it was not immediately our choice, like what kind of, the idea came through, the curator is working on sleeping and dreaming actually. So it was just discussing with Kati too, as I just mentioned. But Elena, you want to maybe add?
Yes, well, in a sense, we, for the time being, we're really trying to be pedagogical. So there's what we have produced so far in 1 year. It's impressive in a sense that we really, it was all about practice. So it was all about the curatorial practice taken to its extreme, taken to a place where basically curators never go, and all based on empathy in a way. So because the situation also was such that we had to do it, we had to go further because there were so artists, you know, in distress. And then somehow we plugged into this way of functioning a lot of theories and unresolved questions, you know, for art and for curating. So, and we continued, and now we are kind of ready to share it with institutions. Our first, let's say, well, before we have worked with institutions, but there were smaller institutions. Now Flamingo, it's an established institution, and this is a very difficult invitation. This is a very difficult invitation because of this polluted ground. So we had a question whether to go or not to go, and we worked for, let's say, several months to get an appointment with the director, because we said, look, to the curator, we want an appointment with the director, we want to discuss, we want to share with him how we work, we want to bring to his attention as much content as possible. Because what happens actually, and this is quite incredible, that people who run the institution, especially in the French context, they have no art background. They have no art background. So they come from Sciences Polytechnique, you know, all kind of management schools and so on and so forth. So they are very far from the artists and from the artist comments and from where the art world is today, you know. So that would be the first step. And then after a lot of thinking and brainstorming, so how to address the issue and how also to kind of make the project, our proposal of the initiative, carry this whole kind of problematic of pollution of the soil, you know, and all this kind of history of, basically it was a medical factory, and when they invented a kind of like medication, anti-inflammatory medication in the 19th century. So this is how it all started, and we're getting there with our initiative. So after a lot of work and doubts and struggles, you know, and speaking to the artists, we asked Kati too, our shaman, to purify the space. And to purify the space with her means, with her rituals, and to a kind of twist and to like the whole our proposal around this notion of purification. So, and other artists are also plugging in and kind of interpreting in their own way, you know, her ritual actually.
So we will see how, well, we have tomorrow actually, I will report tomorrow to the students how it went. Mm-hmm. But yeah, thank you, Elena, for pointing that out. Yeah, and it's a very interesting project. It's Annabelle Lacroix, who is the curator, who is a French curator who used to live in Australia, and who is working on the concept of, I think she did a project also in Germany on the concept of sleeping as a practice of resistance and insomnia, and very interesting, yeah, with a variety of different positions. But she was interested herself first in when she found out about the initiative.
But maybe Nataša and Elena, thank you. We could also get to the second question. So what, in your perspective, from your perspective, could institutions learn from what you were experimenting with in the last year, but also, of course, from other projects that you have undertaken, which go in a similar direction of a renewed notion of what curating actually could mean, maybe?
I would, yeah, I hope that I gave some ideas about that in my very first neoliberal slide that went in the direction of like a total opposite of how the art world functions and what is it based on. And I'm also looking into another Elena here, Elena Agudio, who is also part of an amazing, organization of such a mutual functioning and care and love that is called SEVI Contemporary in Berlin. So we are definitely, I would really claim, and it's important, it's definitely that we are not the only ones thinking about these issues, and it's really important to say that, but why I'm insisting, or why I insisted about the locality, with Elena, we said like, okay, we are intervening into the French system. It's important to say. I mean, also that's why I situated, I try to situate when I say we were here in Paris, we went to Aubervilliers, etc. It's really the French art landscape, as just Elena, you said, it's administered by people that see art as a decoration and, don't want to have anything to do with intersubjectivity, issues of empathy, or think that it's at their, it's at their disposal, basically. So, and I think that's what we are trying to say, is that the way they are, these big institutions especially, are run is false, is wrong. It's quite simply to say it very blunt.
But you also mentioned that the contract that was put together by the artist who you worked with a lot was also influential for your approach to this, or could it also be, because this is about structural changes, this is intervening into how things work, and I would be interested in your take on this. You know what I'm having.
Elena and I have something that we still have to do, which is our manifesto, which we wanted to work on, and then I got invited to be part of the Cité des Arts, and this somehow went or transformed itself. Let's say it didn't remain in the writing. It became something that is now much more part of the collective of initiative, because this is also what we insisted with Elena. It started as us being two curators wanting to do stuff differently, but we insist that now it becomes a matter of a collective responsibility, so to say, of this initiative. I don't know, Elena, if you want to chip in, but I would say that that you want to add something. Maybe I would say that it's again, if we are going to produce this, it will be produced collectively and not by the two of us. Elena, you want to add?
Yeah, because it is a question which interests a lot of people, because we had this talk, we were invited to speak at the Canal, the Canal Centre Pompidou in Brussels, and also this question, I feel that it's a kind of a burning question today.
Yes.
For many people, also for many curators, also for many institutions. Exactly how to change, how how to invent a kind of like a pedagogy, and we give it a thought, you know, with Nataša. So should it be kind of a pedagogical approach, or indeed should we rather go with Kenya to draft a kind of a manifesto or contract of trust and say, you know, if you would like to work with us, this is what it means. So because we come with the meaning, so we are not doing anything with any conditions. Or there's another, or we create a kind of mini collective sort of from our initiative who would come and speak with us to say that we're not alone. We're not just like two curators, but people are very different. So we are white, able, heterosexual women. So, but inside of our initiative, people are very different, and we are obliged to take into account our neurodiversity, you know, our social situation, our psychological situations. We are a mini society, we're an ecosystem. And this is also what we were discussing and saying, you know, we're not a network, we don't like this word. We're not a kind of collective, because also doesn't feel right. It's a sort of like an ecosystem, you know, of relationships, of feelings, of emotions, of intuition also, you know, exchange, because so right now it works, and it works like a miracle, honestly. So, and how do we go to institutions say, okay, there's this multiplicity, which we are, and you have to take this into account. Not me, not you, not just like a kind of a curatorial agenda, you know, curatorial identity. So it's more than that. So, but we are in the process. It's not clear yet.
Thank you. So I don't want to monopolize the questioning or the asking here, but would like to invite everybody to, to comment, to ask what you would, Mirella, I see you, please.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. It was super inspiring, especially to see the different projects. I have one question and one comment. So maybe to start with the question, I would be curious, and how do you see the possibility of scaling up these kind of practices that have care at its kind of as its core value or as its mission, let's say? Because as I kind of observe different projects, it usually creates, let's say, like some sort of intimate public. But I'm wondering if how do you see the possibility of scaling it up?
I will again offer the floor to, so I co-speak with Elena on this, but thank you for your question and the comments, Mirella. It sounds like a mission impossible, but if we kind of, you know, I think that it's a lot of it will depend on this kind of discussions with the institutions, I think. And on their curiosity. So if they are curious, if they care so much that they want to know more, then maybe it's a starting point. I would hope so. But it does take a whole system, basically. No, institution is also an ecosystem in itself, and I would just start by. Really like with a very, I mean, we're starting with a very modest, we are not even structured into an association until now. There are two curators of younger generation who you know, who have been with us in a way since the beginning, and they gave the kind of leading idea that maybe we should structure it to at least have some finances that should be shared then equally, because now, for example, when we received something like when we were paid for our talk with Elena, this is also something I didn't mention, we usually shared this money among the members that needed most, and there were a few that, you know, or for example, when we organized the talks, this discussion or that was then on the radio, what we did is that we commissioned and paid Ismail to do bracelets, to envision the design and produce them, and we gave this instead of a fee. But it's something that, you know, so just to also to go a little bit beyond the idea of the money exchange, you know, or just to conceive it differently. And as you say correctly, I think it's possible for now on this intimate scale of 20, 25 people. But in order that this scales up, first, the capitalist system has to be destroyed. And the colonialist, you know, drive that drives this planet since centuries has to be destroyed as well. And I think we all are working on that, honestly. So I think I'm pretty optimist, but it takes time and it takes steps, and we are also doing that to be inspiring, hopefully, you know, so that you might think of other strategies and might start to. It's really a stone in the pool. I mean, it's a stone in a lake. It's you know, like how Katitu talks to us when she speaks about different levels of existences, and you know, she always says, I know that people think I'm completely you know, completely out of this planet, which I am, but she is at the same moment an extremely grounded person, extremely rooted and extremely grounded. So I would say that if she manages and we manage with her to and you see me, I'm very materialist. I'm not talking to you, I'm not chanting here, I'm not doing some esoteric rituals. I can, but I will not this evening. But it's something to consider, how to affect one's immediate environment. And I think with Elena, we're trying to affect our immediate environment for now. Elena?
Difficult, very difficult. Yeah, there's a question of scale. Yeah, we are trying indeed, and just to like on an optimistic, like from the, let's say, being optimistic. This question of care is so relevant today, and there's so many discussions about it. So we really hope that all these drop somehow. And also we're inventing tools. We're inventing tools. We're making them attractive, you know, we're making them work. We're giving them to artists to use, to young curators to use. So all that at some point, we can only hope that it will be used. But also we curate in big institutions, you know, well, relatively big. So Nataša has her exhibitions, me too, I have my exhibitions in museums. And more and more, I really do things in a certain way. So also inspired by the work of the initiative. And also, you know, when you speak to the big institution, you say, okay, it's not like my own kind of like a crazy idea. No, we have the initiative. We have been working for, you know, 1 year. We have produced things. We know how it works. This is kind of tools we have been using. And then, in a sense, I'm also more willing to listen because it comes with experience.
Yeah, definitely. And also this is something that I wanted to say, and it goes back to the image of stone and the resonant, like the circles that create around. It really affects also me and my work and my daily being and practice, of course. You know, as a social or family person or at work. And it almost sounds like I'm such a good Christian, or I'm such a good Muslim, or I'm such a good Buddhist, you know. But it's really something about, you know, practice transforms you, and I'm very concerned with these questions now in each institutional environment I'm invited.
Beatrice?
I just wanted, because thank you very much for these really fantastic talks and examples. And as Elena, you talked about these tools that could you maybe, I'm interested what tools we can imagine. Could you give some examples?
Yes. For example, so in the initiative, we have very different people. So we have artists who are artists, like with a certain amount of visibility, you know, connected to the French system. Then we have several people who are refugees. They're refugees in France. And we had this one person who was asylum seeker. He didn't have a status of the refugee. So, and then from the very beginning, you know, how to connect somehow, how to help from our point of view, curatorially speaking, how can we help these people? Because we started to support practices who would not be supported without us, or not in the right way, because they're not institutional, they're not easy to kind of, you know, exhibit in institutions, they're not easy to market, they're not market oriented, galleries couldn't help. So, and we had very limited means. So we had to be extremely creative, actually. So we had to work with all those like small means and try to be useful, to create this use value from the curatorial point of view for all these different people who need different things. And then this is what our curatorial, so to say, creativity kind of plugged in. So how can we help Ismail, who is an asylum seeker? What is his problem right now? So he needs his refugee status. What can we do for that? And who can help us? So we came together with an initiative. So who can do what? So, and every project had this kind of inbuilt use value. So that was a tool where we said, how can we, well, following maybe at some point like Tania Bruguera, but not copying, because it is a very, very specific situation we have created. So how can we invent this right connections as a kind of like a tools for this initiative to help artists on where they are? Because some need, for example, Nataša, when she started to working at the Cité des Arts, we also, because these people, some of the artists, they were just arriving to France, and they're amazing artists. And this is what we're also saying, you know, they are not some kind of people who would need to go to the primary school. No, they're all amazing artists with different level of education, you know, different level of experience. And what we have been doing, we have been inviting inventing tools for them they can use.
Maybe, Elena, it's a good example what you did when you did the exhibition. So what the exhibition that I mentioned that you created in together with the association Porte Ouverte sur l'Art, one of the strategies, or one of, it's not a strategy, but it's really how to say, an offer that you did to the artists who have for some stayed for some months in Calais, in the jungle, and have been, you know, in different refugee camps, but are artists in them, like poets and artists. So Elena proposed that you wrote their biographies. You wrote their biographies, which are very complex and very complicated. Thing, a CV. How do you write a CV of a person who has been for 6 years disconnected from any kind of career because she or he was trying to survive. So on a daily basis. And so Elena really beautifully, like you found a way, like just in a few lines to say, you know, not to victimize. Also, we are not here to. This is not victimization of these people. Are really for us. They are survivors, and they are our most inspiring models, actually. And so Elena did, like, okay, this person was born, traveled, stayed in different places. You know, like this becomes part of the narrative.
Right. Yeah, these are like tools for we're inventing tools for the artists, how they can plug into the system, like for those who are really very, very far from the system, and the system would not notice them. The system would not pay attention. And every project is a kind of this, always this kind of unit of invention of new tools. For example, when we did the photo shoot for Ismail, so we said, okay, what can we do? We have nothing, for the time being. We can't influence the French judges. There's no way. But we can help Ismail, who is in distress, because it is horrible. He's been waiting for the status for 4 years. So 4 years, he was going and trying to, he was refused once. So we said, firstly, already we will support him, and we will tell to everybody that he is an artist. Not only he's an artist, but he's an amazing artist. So this is what we deeply believe. So we organize for him a photo shoot where we create proofs, for authorities to use. So, and he can always go to the lawyer, to the judge, and tell them, I'm not just anyone, I'm an artist, and this is my proof. Created by 2 curators, recognized, acknowledged, and other artists. And then when, for example, we work with other people, with Katitu. So Katitu, who is an absolutely extraterrestrial, amazing person, practicing shaman, but she's also an artist. And she's also invisible in the system because she's too complicated for the system, for the art world, for all the sort of units and institutions. So here we're also trying to invent some kind of tools for her, how she can reach out, precisely not going through the kind of established, we don't want to explain her practice. We don't explain, we don't translate, we don't put, but we have to invent something through exhibitions, maybe through plugging her into specific context, maybe through bringing her together with other artists, so that she can a shine that her practice can reach out, that other people will kind of realize what it means and what it means for art, because she's more important for art than we are important for her. We need her, not the other way around, in a sense. And this is what we're trying also kind of to vehicle, this level of, let's say, privilege also. And it's something extremely questionable that when you say a refugee artist, so you create a kind of invalidating condition for someone. So and all that is very complex, but we are we're inside of all these complex questions.
Thank you so much. Actually, I'm sorry, but we are running out of time. People are leaving us already in the chat, but thanking you all for your inspirational thoughts and examples. So if there is no other pressing question, I would thank you again, Nataša, and also Elena, for being with us tonight, for sharing your experiences, your inspirational thoughts and practices. And we really look forward to keep on discussing how we could turn curating more into a caring practice. And actually with the students in our group, we will see Nataša tomorrow, which I'm very much looking forward to. But for tonight, I wish you a very relaxing and good night. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much to all.
Thank
you,
you,
Elena.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.